Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you are. Welcome to another Wizer webinar. Today, we're going to talk about how to build your startup. Actually, this is one of the most exciting topics for me. I've been an entrepreneur for most of my career, and I asked my friend here, Gil, which has been an entrepreneur for many, many years as well. We both built and sold cybersecurity startups, and we're here to share with you. We're very, very excited about it. So let's start with Gil. First of all, give a bit of intro about you. I've known you for years, and I'm really excited about what you've done and the path you took. So why don't you share a little bit about with the people here about your
Sure.
background?
So thank you, Gabi. It's a pleasure to be here, guys, to the entire Wizer community. Thanks for having me and hosting me today. Gabi and I are separated, even though it looks on the screen like we're right next to each other. In reality, we're actually like 5 minutes apart, I think, as the crow flies, right? Maybe a mile.
We should have done it, yeah,
Yeah,
now
we
that I'm
could have
thinking about it.
in person. But during Corona times, we were just talking about how effective it can be to dial in from anywhere. So my name is Gil Zimmermann. I was previously, before my current gig, I was co-founder and CEO of a company called CloudLock, as Gabi mentioned, in the cybersecurity realm. One of the pioneers in cloud security, sold that business to Cisco in 2016, and then grew that business as Cisco's cloud security business until 2019. And then left, and me and my two co-founders, Ron Zalkin and Tzachi Shapsa, we started a venture studio, which I'm sure we'll get to talk about today, that we call FXP, where we build companies for a living. So this is very relevant and highly passionate topic for me to talk about. Married, got 3 kids, and I started my career in entrepreneurship and in the cyber realm in the Israeli Defense Forces, military intelligence and the computer sciences worlds intersecting. I've worked for big companies like Sun Microsystems and EMC and Cisco, as I mentioned, small companies like ones I've started and startups that I've joined. And I'm always passionate to interact with and get back to the entrepreneurial community. So I'm really looking forward to today's talk.
Yeah, well, it's addicting, the entrepreneurship. Once you do it, you just can't let it go. You have to do it again and again. It's a roller coaster, but it's a lot of fun. And so for those of you, a lot of you know me from Wizer. A little bit about my history. So before Wizer, I founded another company. It was called ObserveIT. We sold it to Proofpoint a few years ago. The company dealt with insider threat, which is what actually led me to later to do Wizer, because insider threat is basically, hold on guys, I'm getting notifications here. So insider threat was a lot about dealing with people and seeing what they're capable of doing. So from trying to monitor and stop them, I decided to educate them so it won't happen in the first place. Now, during my career, a lot of people come to me and ask, I have this idea, what do you think? And there's a lot of good ideas, there's a lot of crap ideas, to be honest. But when you start, my question to you, Gil, is like, why don't people follow on their ideas? A lot of people have those dreams, they talk about it, I tell them what to do, but still, they don't follow their dream or their idea, and many times other people do that, and then they tell me, a few years later, remember that idea that I had, somebody did it. What do you think stopping people from actually taking action and doing it?
Yeah.
By the way, guys, if you have questions, please, post them. I want this to be interactive. I think there's a big opportunity here, guys, for you to ask questions and get answers from, people that have done this, took that journey. Anyway, Gil, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, so I think there's actually like a couple different topics weaved into that question, which is what do you do with an idea, and how do you come up with an idea, et cetera. And I'm sure we'll get a chance to dig into that. But I think the more pertinent part of that question is like, how do you get started? Like, how do you take that first step, and why don't more people do that? And I would say it's a combination of 2 things. One is comfort zone versus what I like to call the courage zone, which is outside of your comfort zone. It takes courage and it takes discomfort, and that's how you're in that courage zone, which is it's uncomfortable. And I think it's like that in everything in life. That's just my life philosophy. I tell my kids the same thing. It's like when you're working out, it hurts. That's a sign that you're actually, you're starting to grow. And when you're studying for, your math exam, it hurts, right? It's like, it's uncomfortable. You don't know the answer. It's not easily accessible to you. That means you're learning, right? And so pushing yourself outside of that comfort zone takes courage, and it takes the willingness to live outside of the comfort area. So I think that's why most people just don't do it. They're just too comfortable, and it's hard.
Yeah.
They have the idea, but they're not willing to kind of give it up. And I would say the second thing is, and that's maybe a personality trait, which is, I believe that people with a bias for action that, are the ones that step forward, are the ones that succeed, because the idea is just an excuse to get started. It's not what I've yet to meet an entrepreneur that does exactly what they said they're going to do.
Yeah.
So it's just the ones that actually do end up doing, or at least are in the competition. It's kind of like, you can go to the Olympics and sit in the stands. There's no chance you're coming home with the medal. If you're on the field, there's still a very little chance you're coming home with a medal, but at least there's a chance. So it's really about putting yourself out in that field.
I think, one of the things that I tell people is, it's, people think they have one chance. If I have to come up with this amazing idea, and until I have it, I won't do it. And entrepreneurship is a journey. It's, you may probably, I would say, you will likely fail your first startup project, whatever you call it. And it's fine, like, you may be hired as an employee in a company, and it may not be a good fit, and you may want to move on. Same thing with entrepreneurship. It's a journey. So it's really important to take a deep breath, backpack, and understand that this is a life journey, and not it's not a lottery ticket. Hopefully I'll succeed, because when you fail, you learn from that, and next time you're way better. And for me, at least, I started very young. Not everybody has to be, by the way, you can start at any age, right? But I started very young. I think it was, in my advantage. I think, the more time you have to walk that journey, the more chances you have, and the less risks you take, right? Because you don't have yet a family, and you don't have a mortgage. So, you're just betting on your lifestyle. So I tell people, first of all, start as soon as possible. There's really nothing to get ready for this. This is a journey, get out there, be prepared to fail, and get up and do it again. So one question that is a follow-up question to this, a lot of people say, okay, I get it, but I can't leave my job, right? Like, I have a family, I have a mortgage, if you didn't start it, day one, when you were young. So what do you tell them? What do you do?
Yeah, I think it's a key dilemma. So just to touch on your point on, when's the time to get started? Yesterday, right? And so you're right. And as soon as you feel that urge to go out there and get started, I don't think there's a right recipe. I didn't start as young as you did, Gabby. I kind of looked at it and said, I want to go work for others to get educated on someone else's dime, so that I don't have to bankroll myself, because I couldn't afford it. So that was one thing. So I think, and that touches to this point too, which is you can always learn, and you can always, you can be an intrapreneur before you're an entrepreneur, and put yourself in a position inside of another company where you're taking initiative, where you have a bias for action. And I'm sure we've all experienced this, where when you have people in your organization that take initiative, sometimes they get dinged for it, but usually they get praised for it, and they rise in the ranks. So even if you're in a current situation, you can still be an intrapreneur on your way to becoming an entrepreneur on your own. And I don't think
at any age,
at any age, in any position, really. It's just about, looking at, I think this touches back to the idea of that kind of false hope of we have to wait until we come up with an idea. I don't think entrepreneurship is about the idea. I think it's more about the pain and persistence to follow through and solve that pain. So
I love that.
Yeah, I think it's, if you understand a pain that you're having, or that your customers are having, or that the market, is experiencing, then go dive into that pain and figure out how you're going to go iterate until you solve that pain enough for enough people that they're willing to pay, and and more of them will come out and pay as well, or engage. Then that's how you come up with those ideas, less around waiting for, okay, come up with this idea. And you can do that even while you're working for somebody else. Block off time. And worst case, go raise money if you need money. And if you don't know how to do that, go figure out how to do that so that you can go do that next thing. I think that's the persistence piece, which is being relentless and figuring out what do I need to do to get to this next block, and if there's something blocking me in the way, what do I need to do to remove that one? And then the people that do that just ultimately are the ones that are left standing, and they're the ones on the field, like I said.
Yeah. Look, I think most startups have pivoted. I don't know. I don't have statistics. We both pivoted. I remember that you told me, how you started. Maybe you can share that.
Yeah.
And we also pivoted. I'll talk about that, in a minute. Why don't you start with that? Because you have this idea, you are like pumped about it. You're sure this is the main thing, and then you hit the market and it doesn't work, and you're like, what do I do? So I love going in zigzag at the beginning, and I have to admit I'm a zigzag guy, at least at the early stage. You have to pivot. So why don't you share, what you told me about,
Sure.
how you started and where you pivoted?
So I mentioned I was at CloudLock, but CloudLock wasn't the first name of the company. First name of the company was Aprigo, and it started in 2008, 3 years before we completely pivoted, or 2.5 years before we pivoted to CloudLock. And we perfectly designed this business at Aprigo. So Tsahi, my co-partner, had worked for NetApp, and Ron had worked for Interwise, which became AT&T. We understood big businesses and major problems, and we felt like there was a need to help address data security on-premise and mostly unstructured data, which made up the vast majority of data that was out there. And we thought it would make sense to solve that by building a cloud-hosted service rather than add more infrastructure to an already explosive infrastructure problem. And so we designed it based on that principle. We understood the pain, we saw customers experiencing it, and we went out and built this thing. And we raised money. It was great. We built a company around it, but it was very, very difficult. We were having this conversation of, cloud wasn't cloud at the time. It was on demand, SaaS. We didn't even know how to call it.
That's
cloud.
why you have that dinosaur behind you, right?
Dinosaur, yeah. And we were talking to customers, and we were telling them about the cloud, and most of them were like, this thing is never going to work. Like, I can't trust the cloud. There's never going to be secure, blah, blah, blah. We called those guys dinosaurs. And we're like, you're going to go extinct. And there's this evolution that's happening. And then for our own purposes, we built a version of our product to support our own internal work. We called it CloudLock because we had built our business entirely cloud-based because we were born in 2008. We put it out on the marketplace just to give ourselves a chance to get lucky. We're like, you know what? Maybe other people have the same problem for their cloud data. We had data on Google Apps for Your Domain, it was called at the time, before it was G Suite, that now turned into Google Workplace, and Salesforce and others. And sure enough, people just started buying. People had the same exact pain. And one of the first customers we closed was Facebook. We closed like a $75,000 deal, which was insane for us at the time. In like 3 or 4 phone calls, not even. And that was what we called the holy shit moment for us. It was a holy shit moment for the customers, which is like they'd never seen this level of visibility. And we figured, okay, we got to release the anchors from the terrestrial on-premise stuff and just be dedicated to only focusing on those customers that are experiencing the type of pain we are, which is they want to use the cloud. They don't have enough, comfort and security and visibility into what's going on there. But if we can complement that and address it, then they're going to move all that stuff that used to be sitting on premise is going to go and become cloud-based. So CloudLock was the name of our internal project. It became the name of our company. And we fired all of our old customers, by the way.
That's important, by the way. We're going to talk about it, but that's a key thing, knowing to focus on, not just collect money, but actually make sure the money is coming from repeatable sales. That you can scale. Scale is a huge.
Make sure you're aligned. You can't, especially in a subscription-based business, your like vision of where you're going to be delivering value has to align with what your customers are trying to accomplish. And if it doesn't, then you're either misdirecting them or you're going to end up disappointing, both sides. And so those that wanted to join this cloud, vision and journey, we were 100% with them. And by the time we sold the company, we had 1,000 customers, paying customers.
Nice.
Hundreds of thousands of free. Yeah.
So, we had something similar. So we're talking about 14 years ago, we're talking about insider threat, and people were like, it's really disappointing when you go to a meeting, everybody agrees with you. Insider threat is the real problem. So it was never like something people said, I don't get it. But on the other hand, they were like, but we can't implement it, because we trust our users. Culturally, it's gonna be devastating to even tell people we're monitoring them or do it behind their back. So we had a very, very hard time to actually sell this at the beginning in the first days. So we had to pivot, and we were like, okay, guys, we get it, but what about your remote vendors? You know, you have people coming in that are not your core team. What about them? What if they mess up? You know, and everybody was like in agreement. Yeah, you know, we have to do that. So we switched from beginning as an insider threat monitoring solution to remote vendor monitoring solution. Insider threat later picked up. We got it back to insider threat, to the original idea, and you know, it became the biggest company around insider threat. But you know, you have to be able to pivot. And it was scary because at the beginning we were selling per agent. And of course, if you have more employees or more servers, the price is higher. And when we sold it for remote vendors, there were less. So the quotes went down significantly.
Yeah.
However, we were able to, you know, sell it like a cookie cutter. You know, everybody understood the pain. They were willing to pay. It wasn't that expensive, and we just blew up. So, but you know, I do want to go back to the question. You know, at least I'll answer on my end. Do you quit your job? You know, I would say no. You know, you have to have a money stream, something that will allow you to build your new company. So, you know, don't think that you need to leave your job in order to build a company. I would say in most cases that I spoke to entrepreneurs, they had something, you know, they were either consultants or they had a job and they did it, you know, after hours, or, you know, whatever it is, it was until they got to a point that they either raised money or they had sales and felt comfortable that they actually did that leap of faith and, you know, left everything, you know. And by the way, founders get a huge pay cut, guys. So, you know, if even if you raise like 10, 20, 30 millions, it's not going to you, you know. And that's another topic. You know, people are excited about, you know, raising a lot of money, but that's just a tool. The money is a tool for you to build your business. You know, it's up to you to build to eventually build your business. So there are a few questions here. I'll touch them in a second. But I do want to ask, so, you know, where do you find a co-founder? So you're ready to go, you have your idea, you're willing to work, you know, the hours, after hours, or, you know, willing to pivot, everything we spoke about. You know, should you do it alone? If not, how do you get somebody else? You know, it's hard enough for you to decide if to leave your job or not. Like, how do you get a co-founder?
Yeah, maybe I'll just back it up a tiny second
Yeah.
for the do you leave your job thing. I think of it a little bit differently. So first of all,
Okay.
when people say I can't leave my job, I kind of take it into, well, what does that mean? What can't you define can't, right? Because a lot of people don't want to, and they confuse want or don't want with can't. And it depends, you know, how much you can afford. But I do think that mentally, your job needs to be to start your next thing. That's your first job. You might have a second job, which used to be your first job, which is to sustain your cash flow. But now this is your job. Your job is to build this next thing and will it into existence. And to do that, it has to be your first passion, and that has to be your first job. And that also has to be why you go out there and you interact with, you network with other people that share in the passion. And to me, finding co-founders is about finding people that you trust, that share in the same passion around the pain that you are passionate about. So if you want to solve a specific problem, it's more important to find people that care about that problem than it is to find people with specific skill sets, because this journey is long and it's rough. There's a lot of ups and downs. People don't talk about the downs as much because it's, you know, it's not as sexy as the ups and kind of the outcomes that come out of it, but they're just as sharp as the downs. You know, the downs are just as sharp as the ups. So it's better, in my mind, not to go through this alone. And I think it's also for your own sanity. You want that sounding board. You want, you know, conflicting opinions and different perspectives to create a much more complete view of whatever it is, you know, problem that you're looking at or you're trying to solve. So, and I've been blessed, you know, to have amazing partners, and we've endured and continue to partner to this day. But in my mind, I know that when I'm looking at a three-dimensional object, I'm only seeing one dimension, and I need the other two perspectives to be able to put the puzzle piece together. And so that's what you want to look for, people that complement your worldview and yet can fit together, and it's not, you know, always a clash. And then the best way to figure out if you're going to work well together is to work well together. And so yeah, is to get started working on it and then figure it out and see if it's something that you can build a relationship around, or you just clash and are irreconcilable, and then just move on, just like you were saying before. Quickly
Yeah.
cut your losses before you get started. Because I tell entrepreneurs a lot that this is, an entrepreneurial co-founding arrangement. It's more than a marriage. This is, and especially once you raise venture capital money, or you've set expectations, you have a team to manage. There's a tremendous amount of weight and responsibility that's on your shoulders, and you can't just walk away.
Yeah. I think, just to add to what you said, when you look for co-founders, it's not mandatory, but what I like to do is to find people that are strong in the things that I'm not. So for example, let's say I'm a very good product guy, I would probably look for somebody in sales, just as an example, somebody that will complement and not necessarily, and that also reduces the clashes, because if we have two CTOs, very smart guys, then of course they have more opportunities to clash. But when you have somebody that is, working on the product and another guy working on sales and maybe another one on marketing, you have to understand what are the components you need, because that also helps you build the product when you don't have funding, because all of you are probably working for free at the first few months, or even a year sometimes. So you just don't need to pay for a marketing or a sales guy if that's one of your co-founders. So I think it's very, very important to have a co-founding team and to bring those people. And like you said, so here are a few questions that we're getting. One of them is, I'll just summarize it, but basically, so how do we assess our initial ideas? Like, how do I know if what I'm doing is a good fit for the market? If it's, how do I validate the idea? Because I'm going to give, I'm going to go here to a journey, right? So like, what do I do?
Yeah. So one of the things I learned from one of my favorite mentors, John McMahon, actually just put out a book, and he's a sales, unbelievable sales leader that literally wrote the book on how to build modern enterprise sales organizations. One of the things that he taught me is, is around diving into the pain to the nth degree, which he calls implicating the pain. What are the implications? And that's a very simple process, but very few people actually ask and go through that process, which is, so it's less around the idea. The idea usually people come up with is they know how to solve something, but they're not really clear on what it is that they're solving, and it's not explicit and it's not understood to everybody universally. What does it mean if you don't solve it? So implicating the pain, in my mind, this is how you go about validating your idea mapped to a pain, which is what happens if you don't solve this pain. So one of the reasons that we talked about the pivot, and one of the reasons we pivoted away from on-premise to cloud-based was we talked to customers and we asked them, do you have this pain, like you did? And they say, yeah, of course we have this pain, yeah. So we weren't crazy. And I said, okay, what happens if you don't solve this pain? We're like, well, if we don't solve it, we've had this pain for years, right? So clearly there's not a sense of urgency that they're going to solve this pain. And yet when we talked about the cloud, we said, okay, what about cloud? Are you guys using the cloud? Even the ones that said not yet, we asked them, well, when are you going to address the security thing? We're like, right away. We can't go. Like, we have to go because the board member's talking about it or somebody, but we have to have something there. So we need some level of security there. So that's an immediate visceral pain. So and the implications of what happens if you don't address as well, we either can't go to the cloud, or I'm going to lose my job because I recommended something that's insecure and we got owned or whatever. And so I think the way I like to think about it is you got to find a pain that is like a toothache. People that wake up in the morning with a toothache, they clear their calendar and they go to the dentist. If it's like, my back hurts, or, I pulled a muscle or something, they can walk around with that for months. And so the way to vet your ideas is to talk to as many people as you can in the market and try to figure out and implicate all the way down to what happens if I don't address this, and get to that part of the pain, which is visceral and immediate and requires action. And then now you've got an audience. And if you solve that and you find more people that are like that, they're going to buy your goods. Dentists do okay.
Yeah. I think that, that's one of the hardest things to do, because entrepreneurs in general, we fool ourselves, right? We get in love with our idea and we are convinced that it's good. And we ask questions in a way where we get a yes, or we try to convince, so we talk to a potential customer and we're in sales mode, and, they're not buying right now. So we're exhausting them sometimes with, and they're saying, yeah, this is a good idea, So first of all, you have to be you have to think about it, don't fool yourself. And one of the things that I like to do, and you know, a lot of people say, no, it's impossible and all of that, but you know, it's one thing, and another thing, a lot of people are just, you know, just want to be helpful, and if they like you, they will say, oh yeah, this is a great idea. Oh, I can see how this works. So you don't really know if there's the pain. If people are willing to pay, guys, you know, that's the magic. You know, once somebody is willing to put their hands in their pocket and pay you whatever sum it is, by the way, you know, that's a good indication. And then you're going to say probably, okay, but I don't have a product yet. Okay, I can tell you with ObserveIT, when I started, and also with Wizer, I'm going to talk about it in a second. You know, at ObserveIT, I sold a PowerPoint. You know, I went to customers with, this is what I'm going to do. Are you willing to be a design partner with payment? You know, because if there is a pain and I'm willing to solve it for you, think about it like a project, okay? Like, you're paying me now. Like, we do that all, you know, customers do that all the time. You know, they outsource stuff and they pay. It's just much lower. I'm not, you know, I'm not billing them workable hours. So, you know, if I had to bill them for building something like that, it would be crazy. But I'm telling them, you know what, this is a $5,000 instead of $100,000 of what it will actually cost, you know, the 3 founders to build it or more. But the fact that they're willing to pull money and pay us in advance, that's a lot. And yes, it's hard. It's almost impossible, but that's when you really understand, okay, I'm hitting here a pain that people are willing. And by the way, even free, even just using a product, like with Wizer, we started with the free version before we had the paid version. You know, guys, if any one of you will ever develop a product and you will, you know, try to get people to use it, you know, even if it's free, you will see that, you know, some people said, yes, this is a great idea, and never get to implement your product. So one way to understand if people are excited about what you have is not even, you can even give it for free even before you sell it. Just check if people are willing to actually implement it and use it, because they're going to spend time and money on their end to actually use it. And that's not an easy ask for from a company to do. Hey, use my product. So I think, you know, and then you have to pivot a lot. Let's talk about a little bit about, you know, okay, I don't know how to code. You know, this is another question that we have here. What happens if I don't know the code? You know, what do I do? You know, where do, again,
I think I'll use your, so I like your, you know, on the topic of, you know, how to get people to know that it's good and get people to use it. I think, and I'll dive into the, if I can't code in a second, but the way I think about, you know, people paying for your product is in 3 coins: their time, their reputation, and their dollars, right? Obviously, the dollars is the biggest one that is an indicator for investors and shareholders, but time and network are just, and reputation are just as important. So the fact that they actually use your product, if you give it away for free, is a great initial indicator. Even if you're still free and they recommend your product to other people, that's an even better indicator. If one of your user basically says, hey, I'm willing to publicly post about this is a great solution, I'm using it, it's solving my pain, that's fantastic. It's a form of payment because it spreads kind of the awareness. And you don't necessarily have to monetize right away. And sometimes it's a mistake to monetize right away, but you definitely want to understand that eventually you can, especially in kind of the cyber realm. And so the dollars is also, you know, it's a whole other conversation, which is sometimes there's a mismatch between the people that use your product and have the pain and the ones that were willing and capable of paying for it. And so you have to make sure that those things align as well. So that's why if you know ultimately you're going to create a revenue generating business and not an ad business or something else, then you want to make sure that not only you solve the pain and the people that you're, you know, are using your product, but they're also capable of, you know, of paying for the product. And sometimes that doesn't work. I've had situations where, you know, the CIO will basically say, or CISO will say, I'm not buying that. And that's why I have admins. They can do that, right? Et cetera. So that's just my kind of philosophy in a nutshell on how to quickly iterate through usage, you know, your reputation and dollars.
And by the way, use, guys, you know, like use is using. It's not downloading or registering. We're talking about actually,
every day.
There's a lot of people register to see what it is. I'm talking about, you know, actually using your product to extract value. I just wanted to add that. So yeah, going back to this, I don't know to code. What do I do?
Yeah, so you answered it already. I mean, you said we did the same thing. I raised our first round for Apergo before it was CloudLock with PowerPoint. I learned how to, iterate really quickly. We would develop in one-day sprints on PowerPoint because you can compile that in an instant and literally use that with the same design partners. We had a name for what you described, which is we called it a conditional PO, which is can we get a conditional PO, which is if we build it, will you pay for it, even before we've actually produced it. And we would take a PowerPoint presentation, and today you can, PowerPoint's antiquated. So, build it in Coda, build it in Miro or Monday, whatever it is, build an online version that you can quickly iterate and share and get the customer feedback around, if we've solved this problem, does this qualify and your problem accurately? And if we address it in this way with this approach, will you pay and actually use something like that and then test it? And then to the second point is surround yourselves with people that with complementary skills. So if you're not the one that's coding, you better be capable of doing other things and find somebody else on the team that can be the one that can code. But you can always, and you always will be in that position where you have to augment your skill set with new people that bring more capabilities. That's how you grow a business. You don't grow it by everybody continuing to do the same thing. You bring more people that can do new things and add on. Yeah.
So you just to add to that, like you said, you complement with other people that if you don't know to code, you basically bring a co-founder that knows how to code. But also today there's remote work, and there are different regions in the world that you can build a product less expensive than in the US or other regions. And so you can do that. And I think it's important to build an MVP. One of the things that I like to say is if you are proud of your MVP, you launched it too late. Like an MVP means you're building only the core of your offering. And by the way, that's very hard because people, when I ask people, okay, so what's your idea? Well, do this and this and this and this. Every time you say "and," you dilute your message. Means that you're not fixed on the value that you're providing, because you think that if you add more, then you will, people will buy. But the question is, what is that one thing, without saying "and this and that," what is that one thing that you can build within no more than 3 months? And it's just to show people and to build trust and to allow people to experience that aha moment, because we are all eventually want to get to that aha moment where people get our vision. So, with Wizer, I started, even before I had developers, I started posting videos because I had this idea that, you have to commercialize security awareness. The existing security awareness was a little bit boring. I felt like that, and we have to make it more like, Instagram, TikTok style, engaging, viral content. So, why wait to develop a product? I just created the videos and I posted them online. I saw the reaction. It gave me that, that comfort. And by the way, the first videos, actually a lot of them, I did. And it doesn't mean that I knew how to create audio and video, but I learned, because when you really want something, you can learn it. Don't just say, I can't. I said I can. The first ones were not that good, and it got better and better, and now I'm very proud of them. Now we have a bigger team that does that. It's not only me, but I think that's important. So here is another question. So you have your MVP or your PowerPoint, and you want to start selling. Where do you find your first customer? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, I think you do what you just said, which is you start putting content and thought pieces out there, and you go into the watering holes where people that share the same passions you do come to, and you engage in conversations. And I like to use another trick that I learned from another friend of mine is, the best thing, the network effect. The best thing I can get from an interaction with a potential design partner is 2 names for potential design partners, or 3. Right. So, and worst case, you get 1. That way, you're not diminishing, but your kind of growth factor, if it's more than 1, then you're in a good spot because you're continuously growing your addressable audience that you can talk to and iterate with. So you're always asking people for who else do you think has this problem, or do you know has this problem, or who talks about it, and you'll find other thought leaders, and then you interact with them, and you share and bounce ideas back and forth. And ultimately, you get to the people that have enough of that pain firsthand, where they say, "I want to engage and figure out, can we have this conversation of how we're going to solve this?" And it's interesting for me. And I think part of the value in for many people isn't necessarily, it doesn't start with solving the problem. It starts with understanding the problem. So if you have, and that's part of what you bring to the table. So you can produce thought leadership content and start to think about potential approaches and attract other people that that feel the same way. That's, I think, how you start to find people. And like I said, if this is your first job, this is what you're gonna. It's not about sitting in your basement, coding, and then you put this out on the internet and people will come. They won't come.
Yeah.
It's about putting yourself out there and going to to the audience.
This is a great thing, and people need to remember, like, you build a good product, it doesn't mean people will just come. So the thing that I tell is usually, look at the go-to-market like a product, right? So you have to troubleshoot, and a lot of people here on the call are, security folks, IT folks, business owners. We all troubleshoot for life almost, right? Forgetting that you have to troubleshoot your sales process, and I don't, like, most people do that. We're building a product, nobody wants to buy it, or they say, I'm very good at at security, but I'm bad at sales, so they just accept that. The go-to-market is a product of its own. You have to try it and change it and zigzag, pivot from one go-to-market to another go-to-market. You can start with partners. If the partners are not working, or you can do things in parallel. You can reach out to partners and you can start to sell direct, and you can do online. I'm talking about the first days. It's hard to juggle later, but you see what works, and you quickly pivot. Because if your partners are not selling this, don't blame the partners. Maybe your product is not a good fit for partners. Maybe it's too early. Maybe you're not going to the right partners even. Your product is too cheap for them to make money. So of course they won't be selling this. They need bigger items. You want to say something?
Yeah, I want to say, I think partners is, I think before you go out to partners, it's harder for partners to sell if you don't know how to sell your own products.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to teach others to do that, and you can't expect others to know how to do it when you yourself don't know how to do it. I couldn't agree more that the go-to-market should be productized. And in fact, I'm a firm believer in kind of this movement that's been coined product-led growth, which is another way, for me to put it, is building sellability and marketability into your product, which is especially relevant today because more and more any kind of user behaves in a consumer fashion, which is they want the self-service. They don't want to go through the traditional sales process of having someone send them material and getting on a call and learning. They just want to, you just help me, let me figure out if this thing actually solves my problem and it gives me value. They want to experience the value firsthand, and they want it immediately, and they want it by themselves. And so it's not everything is easy to do that way, but the more you can and the more you think about those aspects that you can bring into your product to facilitate that type of buying behavior that users want, I think the better off you'll be, and the less dependent you'll be on external factors, whether it's your own internal sales organization or external partners, et cetera, because and that ties back to where do you go? Do the same thing that you would do to solve this problem. You Google it, right? What comes up, right? And that's where you start, which is, that's how you find people, and that's where they're having the conversations. You can look at what they're asking, and that's very informative in terms of what you need to build into your product to make it easier for the product to sell itself. And when you nail that, the companies that are able to do that, then because it's automated and it's part of the product, it's much more repeatable and it's much more scalable, and you can really take off and be less hindered. It doesn't mean you don't need a sales organization, but your sales organization, go-to-market organization is going to be way more effective if the product is supporting it.
I love what you said, Google it. It's so basic, but it's so true. People won't Google, I can't sell, what do I do? They just accept it. So I think, again, going to that mindset of I need to troubleshoot this, and I'm going to try different venues on how to sell this, and I'm going to learn how to sell this. And I'm not just going to hire somebody, like I'm actually, because this is the core of the business, right? It's just like a product. If the product doesn't work, like you go in deep. Same with sales. Don't just blame customers or blame the market. You either have to pivot, or you have to change your business model, or you have to change your price. But price is not always, the reason people don't buy. That's like a whole another topic. And one thing you said about making it frictionless, I think this is key, because you want in the self-service, the more friction you add to your offering, the harder is it to sell. It's just like, it's simple as that. It's a funnel. You get people to, pay attention to you. That's a lot, by the way. Today, it's all about attention. Like, you have to figure that out as well. Whether it's social media, we can do a whole webinar about, capturing people's attention. But it all starts with capturing people's attention, and then they register. But, did you allow them to test your product seamlessly, or are you telling them, hop on a call, we'll show you? Because if you tell them, let us do a demo for you, you have to raise money, guys. If you need to do a demo to your customers, go raise money sooner than later, because you need more people, right? And you will just have less leads, because a lot of people will just drop. One of the things we did with ObserveIT when we started, I spent a lot of time on the onboarding process. It was an on-premise solution, sort of like what you had at the beginning. But people had to like download and install SQL Server and install an agent, and just think how many things we asked them to do. So we called it the one-click setup, and basically we bundled everything in. So first of all, test the product. Double click. Of course, it's not ready for production like that. Nobody will install the product like that on production. Everything is on a single server, but it made sense just for the experience. So people clicked download, boom, and we invested a lot. So that reduced the friction and allowed people to experience our product. And I think, that matters a lot.
I think that's the most important thing, is if you look at your business as your job is to deliver the value that your customers are interested in as seamlessly and frictionlessly as possible, then every step along the way is a friction point. If you can skip that step, that's the best way to remove that friction. And the ones that are already working, just grease those and continue to make sure they're working. But the ones where it's slowing you down or people are dropping off, those are the ones that's where you want to focus your attention. And I think if you apply that principle and thinking about how do I quickly deliver and solve that problem, that's the businesses that end up winning. It's easier to find, it's easier to try, it's easier to buy, it's easier to use, and it's easier to share. Then that creates this virtuous cycle, as opposed to this vicious cycle where everything is stovepiped and I got to go find people, then I got to go convince them, and then I got to let them try it, and then I got to let them buy it, and then I have to figure out how to get success out of it. Those are old school ways of thinking about the life cycle of a customer, and it's not how if we had to reinvent businesses from scratch, we would build them. You wouldn't build these. It's like the analogy I like to use is, have you ever met a person that likes to call the support hotline and get the answer of, well, that's not my department, right?
Yeah.
But that's effectively what many businesses are building from scratch. Even they're building departments that solve different phases, and then there's the glue in between those phases, but it's still highly frictional, and doesn't need to be.
So let's move to the next stage of the company. We have here a few questions about, so, we have some paying customers. How do we scale, basically? And this is the question. How do we scale in the business? So let's say we have 10 customers, 20 customers. Now what? How do you scale the business?
So to me, it ties back to just like I talk about implicating the pain around, where do we start and seed the business around understanding what the implications of the pain are. So if you go to a security person, you say, okay, what happens if this happens? They say, okay, that's bad. What does bad mean? Does that mean you lose your job? Does it mean the business tanks? Does it mean there's a regulatory fine? Does it mean you go to jail? There's like a bazillion things that could happen, but you'd never leave it at just this could happen, because that means different things in different people's minds. I think it's the same thing around how do you scale, which is you have to be curious and ask what's working, what's not working. There's the common mantra of fail fast. If you just fail fast, you're gonna ultimately still be failing. You have to at some point have some success in those amongst those failures. So for me, it's about try fast, repeat the successes really quickly, and remove the failures really quickly. But it's about the trying fast that's more important, and then being able to do both of those things. It's equally important to do the things that work as it is to stop doing the things that don't work. And many people forget that. So when you think about, okay, we've got our first couple customers, how do I get the next few customers? They're thinking about how do we solve all these problems, but they're not saying, okay, what was the common factor around the ones that did buy? And the ones that bought the quickest and got the best experience, how do I repeat that and do more of that? And I think that's equally important to the ones that we lost, which is just as important, making sure we reduce that. If you can do that, then that's how you scale your business in terms of penetration into the market. In terms of hiring people, I think we've already addressed that, which is you should always be looking for people to complement and augment your skills.
Yeah.
Not, to me, it's about I often use kind of an analogy, which is we're not trying to lighten the load that we're carrying. We're trying to carry more. So when we hire people, we hire so that we can go do more things, not so that it's easier for us to do the things we're already doing. That's not scaling. That's just relaxing. And you signed up for a tough journey. It's going to continue and probably get harder because you've gotten more resilient. But when you're scaling your business, look for people to complement and do things that you can't do right now, so you can take on more.
Yeah, I think I want to go back to what you said at the beginning. Almost, I think you said it, that you had to let go some customers when you did the pivot. I think if you want to scale, you have to understand your revenues. Where are they coming from, and does that match your vision? Your promise to the world, because it's not about just the dollars, right? Like, it's not like a service company where we have heads and we want to find work for them, and it's all about the revenues and we can do anything for the customer. Here you have to be very honest with yourself. Does this feature or does this request actually help our sales team deliver the same message again and again? For example, at ObserveIT, we did the recording, right? We recorded what people were doing as part of the Inside of Threat solution. So we had customers asking us at the beginning, can we use this for QA? Because we're recording what people are doing. So can we install this on people's computers, on our QA team, so we can record what they're doing, like other products they had? And some people ask, can you do inventory if you're already, knowing what a person is doing? Can you also collect inventory? And at the beginning, we said, yes, yes, yes. What happens is that, you may sell at the beginning, but then they start to compare you to other products because they're in their mindset, you're also a QA product. You brought in a customer thinking you're for QA. Right. And then what happens is the sales guys are confused. They have so many use cases and they're all excited and they're starting to spread all those use cases at the customer, throwing them. So you moved from like a tool that was very focused on one thing to a utility that is good for many, many things. And we had to basically start saying no to many use cases, actually pull out features. Like we were so dedicated to this and committed to this. So we pulled features that we had in the product just so that those use cases won't come to us because they just distracted. And 100%. It distracts a lot of things. It distracts your sales guys' ability to sell. It distracts your marketing team, the ability to position your product and, and explain your vision, because you're basically just a company that is collecting money otherwise.
Yeah, so I think for anybody here that's ever worked for a big company, even small companies, that oftentimes what the sales organization is selling is different than what the product actually does, which is different than what the professional services people ultimately end up having to do. And nobody likes that in any one of those organizations. So I have like an acronym that I like to use that helps tie those things together, and I call it the 4 S's. And it's about, that first S is the story. Like the story that we tell, this is walking the talk, has to match the other 3 S's. And that's the value that, the pain that we talk about and the approach and value that we're going to, the approach that we take to deliver the value. The second S is the sales, right? The sales process needs to tell that story. And it's got to be the same talk track. And so we sell by basically, and the selling, I mean marketing and the whole go-to-market piece. The third one is the subscription, like what I actually subscribe to is what you were selling me, which is what you sold me as a story. And the fourth one is the success, right? So I can actually be successful. And then that becomes this story that we're weaving. Anything outside of that is not part of your story. You shouldn't be selling it. No one's going to subscribe to that, and they're not going to be successful with it. And so you have to maintain that loop, and then you can grow it as your organization matures and as you add more detail to your story. But maintaining that consistently is your primary job, because that keeps it's kind of your North Star. Otherwise, you end up veering into some other territory because it might seem lucrative at the time, but really it's not where you want to go.
Yeah, I want to touch a little bit about marketing, because so you have the sales, we haven't touched marketing. I think there's a huge advantage today, social media in general and the ability, what we're doing right now, um, when you are starting a business, unlike, so many years ago, it was all about knocking on doors and showing what you have, the value that you had, because social media wasn't as effective as today. I'm talking about 14 years ago. I think these days it's just so cheap to create organic content. Again, this is the type of stuff that you have to remember, that you're bringing value. This is part of those assets that you talked about. What's your story? And bringing value to people. And once you do that, you build that trust, and that trust eventually creates a community and allows you to basically eventually acquire customers. And that's part of the brand. So I think for a lot of companies, start thinking about your brand early on. And that brand is basically, why are people buying from you? Like why? It's not like a campaign. We're not talking about building marketing campaigns. Like just, why people care about you in general. And then you have to tell that story. And I'm telling you guys, it's cheap to create organic content if you put your mind into it. Again, it's like going to the gym. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't just, write something and you're waiting, why don't I get those followers and likes immediately? Just like you don't go to the gym, you work out and then you're not pumped, like what's going on. So, but if you do build your brand early on, that will help you to reduce the cost of acquiring a lead, because today the cost is very high for the non-organic. Like it's super high, guys. It's like, on LinkedIn, it's about $150, I think, per form. If somebody fills up a form, that's, the average cost that it will cost you. So, and many of them are not exactly what you wanted, because it was promoted and people didn't understand exactly, and they didn't have the context of everything you're doing. They're not part of your community. They don't know you. So they just filled up a form because they misunderstood the bigger picture. And then you just paid $150 for somebody that is just doing a research. And it's becoming very, very expensive to scale like that. So between remote work and social media and finding co-founders, there is a huge opportunity here for, to build startups and get excited about it, because there's a lot of great ideas. But like you said, ideas are just ideas, I would say it's even, the idea itself is probably like 10% of the overall, business. You have to like start that journey. Anything around that or to add to that?
I think that putting yourself out there, and the marketing in my mind, we can dive into it, is the strategic arm of the go-to-market organization, and it works like compound interest. You have to start early, and it's okay to start small, and anything you put in will accumulate over time, and by at some point in time you'll reach a point where you can no longer afford to touch it. It's like you wouldn't be able to afford, just like you're saying around the forums, right? You've built enough critical mass and awareness and trust and community and linkage in the in the ecosystem that you play in, that to buy that position, if you could, and even if you could, it's probably not going to be as relevant, because it's going to be a flash in the pan type acquisition rather than the sustaining thing that you've built. It's going to be very expensive, and it's not going to be as effective. And I think what people value and what will attract to the best customers and community members is your contribution to that community. It's giving back. It's sharing from your knowledge, sharing from your, and it could be things that or just sharing things that others know that you make accessible, and bringing them. So I think that, and that, by the way, you'd learn a ton from doing these, putting yourself out there. you get feedback and you can start a conversation. Those conversations are bi-directional, and especially now, you can talk to people that were never accessible to you. You'd have to travel to some conference, and and hopefully you bump into them. And now you can do all this stuff. It's freely available.
And by the way, that's also how you can find people for your team or a co-founder. The fact that you're engaging with other people and you're talking and you're part of the community allows you, doing it early on, even when you just have the basic idea and you're not even ready to start a startup, being in that engagement mode and talking with people, you get to know them, and then you can partner with them, and build something cool together. There is another question here, a quick one. There are a lot of questions, guys, but I'm trying to hit some of them that are practical. So how do you put a price for a provisional PO, or let's say, that's, the first product? So, if the MVP, how do I price it for the customer?
It doesn't really matter. Definitely on the first ones. It's not about charging a fortune, and you don't want your value to be dependent on these first
Exactly.
These first transactions. It's just about getting the dollars out of their pocket. So it's got to be something that's semi-meaningful to this person that you're selling and you're solving the pain for. I typically look at, what are the alternatives? How much does it cost to not solve this problem? Or if you were to solve it with a different approach, what would you be paying? And then charge way less than that. Because it's not about the money. It's really more about the sheer fact that they're going through a buying process, and the fact that they see value there. And as a design partner, part of what you're paying for is you're contributing by basically creating a marketing asset that's now going to help you. You'll be able to raise the price later and charge non-design partners. If you really address the problem, especially if you do it in a unique way, then pricing is never an issue. And so I wouldn't look to optimize on the price piece anytime in the beginning. It's really more about driving that engagement. If you can get a paying customer that is using your product and is advocating for your product, then you're in the gold mine. And now the question of how quickly you do build infrastructure to harvest, and mine that gold is a whole different conversation than where is the gold. Yeah.
So last question, we have about 2 more minutes. Is it worth it? Let's say, okay, go ahead. Is it worth it?
My short answer is I don't know that there's there's even an option. Like, you can't. The people that have this, disease, if you will, the affliction of entrepreneurship, they don't have a choice. It's a fire that burns inside you that you have to do, and you have to have that because it depends when you ask. So I think success is not a point in time. It's it's a journey, and it's a destination. And if you enjoy that, then absolutely it's worth it. If it's measured by how many dollars you're going to put in the bank, then it's probably not worth it. At some point, and some other point, it is worth it, and then later it's not worth it again. So like that, I don't think that's a relevant question to someone that's got this, in their blood.
So you took the words out of my mouth. I can't. I would just repeat you. So I'll clone your answers. It's a journey, and it's something that you have to do. So once you get on that journey, for me, I just can't go back no matter what. We all had our ups and downs, and it's a roller coaster. But roller coasters for some people are fun, right? And like you said, it's down. The extremes are both ways. The down, but there's also extreme to the up. Yeah. And when you succeed, it's amazing. So yeah, so that's it. Thank you very much, Gil. Thank you guys for all the questions. There was people asked here, is this going to be recorded? So yes, I'll send the link to everybody that subscribed, and I'll probably post that also on LinkedIn. So thank you for joining, and until next time, have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depends wherever you are. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys, appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.